Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Maida Schuster. I am the Director of Events and Donor Engagement at USC Viterbi, and we are pleased that you could all join us today. We hope you enjoyed the morning session of the USC Women's Conference. And I'd like to turn things over to Tracy Dooley, who will be moderating today's panel. But just a quick housekeeping, there will be some time for questions at the end of the panel. So there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can enter your questions in there. So again, thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoy things, and I turn it over to Tracy.
Thanks so much, Maida, and thank you everybody for joining us today, our fantastic panelists and all our guests here, and I hope you really enjoyed the amazing morning. So my name is Tracy Dooley. I'm a proud Viterbi grad, biomedical engineering 2002, and I'm just really pleased to be here today to talk to you all about venture capital and fundraising, because I think it's a really important topic here. I also happen to be the chair of the Viterbi Emerging Leaders Board, and I think, you know, as we've been seeing women get so much more accomplished, there's a real opportunity for us to sort of think about how we engineer our future. So I'm incredibly pleased to have such accomplished women founders and investors join us today. And before I have them talk about their incredible backgrounds, I would love to set up a little bit of the context for you. So we know that the data shows that women receive only 2% of venture capital dollars. That's obviously a really dismal number, and there's no way to sugarcoat it. And the numbers are even worse for Black female founders and for Latina entrepreneurs as well. And there's no good reason for this, right? The sad thing is that the 2019 all-time high of 2.8% of VC dollars going to women has now dropped to 2.3% in 2020, so we're going backwards. This is not the way we want to be going, right? Of the small and growing 11% of female VCs, only 2.5% of these are female founding partners, and those are the ones who tend to control an outsized proportion of a firm's investment decisions. The good news is when women VCs do make the decisions, they're twice as likely to invest in female founding teams. Okay, so we've got a great panel of folks today to talk to you about these, but I would also like to tell you that it's not all that dismal, okay? So the performance data is clear, and these numbers also speak for themselves. So women business owners are a substantial proportion of US business owners, and they demonstrate 35% higher ROI than all male teams and a 63% higher valuation than all male teams. So there are clear financial reasons to invest in female-led teams and teams with women on them, and to make sure that you are really thinking about you're going to be able to do well and do good. Okay. I'd also like to highlight that today, approximately 41% of women are the primarily financial decision maker in their household. And even in healthcare, which is a $4 trillion market in the US, women make up 80% of those decision makers. So we are substantial consumers, right? Not just of our own dollars, but of where our household dollars go. And at all stages in our life, we have opportunities to be intentional about the choices we make. And we can influence our collective future. And I'd really love to have our panelists share their backgrounds and then talk about their paths to creating value and how they've done that. So with that, I'd love to introduce to you our fantastic panel. We'll probably start with Sam Scott and then go on to Lisha and Juliana, and then I'll finish up with myself. But Sam, over to you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you again to Tracy for inviting me to this panel. I'm very excited. I guess a little bit about myself. So I went to Stanford for college and then came down the coast to USC. So I completed my PhD in biomedical engineering back in 2014. And I also, while I was at USC, did a commercialization technology commercialization program with the business school. And I think that's when I really started to question if I wanted to go into academia or into the startup world. But after leaving USC, I came to Maryland, which is where I am now. And I went to NIH for my postdoc. And it was a wonderful experience. But after that point, I realized that maybe academia wasn't quite for me. And I went from there into a startup company where I worked for a while and eventually wound up founding JuneBrain. So in addition to being a scientist, I'm also a patient. So I have a neuromuscular disorder. And a lot of the challenges I've had on the patient side are what led me to start JuneBrain. And what we're developing now is a retinal imaging system for telehealth use. And it's a way for physicians to remotely monitor retinal disease and neurology patients on a much more frequent basis. So I founded the company in 2017. We've raised a lot of grant funding as well as some investments. And we're still in the product development phase. So we're still very small, but it's been an awesome experience. Thank you.
Hello, Trojan family. It's so good to be here. It's been 20 years since I graduated from USC, but USC is my first love, my first home. Also served on USC Board of Governors and participated in many of these conferences. I'm so proud of what this women's conference has turned out to be. So undergraduate, I went to Marshall. I later went to get my MBA from Columbia and Berkeley. But I came out of USC with a major in business and a minor in information systems. It was the .com boom or bust, however you want to look at it. And I had my eye on the prize, which was Bay Area technology. So I relocated, got an offer, relocated to San Francisco Bay. And I really spent my entire career in digital money movement payment solutions. So think about your wallets, your favorite wallets. Right now I'm at PayPal. I'm a lead for Venmo Commerce. And being in technology, I was typically the only one who looked like me in tech, in engineering, in where I was. And after 20 years, it didn't really change much. So once I learned the game of venture capitalism and how you get in is that you have to create and build wealth. So I became an accredited investor. And then I was able to invest myself in emerging technology companies. And I became the deal flow lead for Pipeline Angels, which is a company of women and femmes investing in women and femmes. So the whole concept is to change who's investing. So essentially 99% are white guys. And so if we don't change that needle a little bit, then other people don't get the money. And so from there, it's really inspired me. I'm on the PayPal Ventures Advisory Board. We have a $500 million investment into Black lives. So I've been helping to lead that. I also founded BLX, which is Black and Latinx, Women for Black and Latinx Women. So the other issue is that women of color don't represent themselves. You know, there's other people speaking for us. And so it's time for us to speak for ourselves. And I also started the Women of Color Capital Collective because of the issue around asset management and lack of representation that women have in asset management. And so until we get kind of the whole spectrum where we have more women investors to support all the entrepreneurs, it's going to be really difficult to change the ecosystem. So I'm excited to be here today with you. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. So I'm Juliana Garizer. I'm originally from Spain, but I started my career in Singapore, in Citi. And then I realized that, you know, banking and the big corporate world was not for me. I wanted to have a bigger impact. So I decided to do my MBA at London Business School and Berkeley. And that's when I fell in love with early stage investing. I was lucky to be hired in the French Riviera to run a group of international angels and their sidecar funds. And actually my chairman was a lady from Washington. They call her Satellite Lady, very big investor in satellites. And she basically brought me all over the world with her to help fund deals and also create angel groups. So that was a great experience. And after that, 10 years ago, I moved to Houston because my husband works for Shell. So once I was there, I decided to join the Kaufman Fellows program to be able to extend my network into the US because I didn't have a lot of connections in the US. And when I was part of the fellowship, I realized about the big gender gap in investing in Silicon Valley. And I decided that I wanted to do something about it. So I started researching and I did that as my end of fellowship project, Bridging the Gender Gap. And that's when I met a lot of the people at Pipeline, many others. And that's when I met Trish Costello, the founder of Portfolia. And I became involved in their first fund, that was the Rising Tide. And then I continued being the lead for the consumer fund. And now the one that I'm most proud of is the Rising America fund, that is basically led by 3 African Americans and 2 Latinas. And basically we've already made our 9th investment. Doing my fellowship, I was hired by the Houston Angel Network, and we became the most active network in the US, then by the Texas Medical Center Venture Fund. And in both, jobs, I felt quite a lot of bias, not only towards me, but also towards a lot of women entrepreneurs and diverse entrepreneurs that were pitching. So, at some point that really went against my values, and I decided that for the next part of my career, I no longer wanted to just fit in, but do something about this. And that's when I decided to create my own angel network, the Business Angel Minority Association, and really be an advocate for diversity. So glad to be here.
Thank you so much, Sam and Lisha and Juliana. This is Tracy, and of course it wouldn't be a Zoom without some technical issues, but it's so fantastic to hear all your backgrounds and how you're really just living your values and creating these incredible futures for yourselves and the entrepreneurs. A little bit about me, and as I mentioned, I have BME 02 from USC Viterbi, and after going to medical school at Stanford, I think it was just really obvious to me that there is an enormous gap between entrepreneurs who are innovating and coming up with these great ideas, but their ability to actually get it in the hands of physicians and to the bedside of patients to really impact health outcomes. And so after that, I moved over to the commercial side to see how I could think about bridging that gap between entrepreneurship and innovation and the clinical side, and working at Novartis Diagnostics, leading strategy and building out the innovation pipeline there, and then leading global operations, gave me a lot of insight into the whole space of diagnostics and pharma, and really understanding how decisions tend to be made there, and also how challenging it can be sometimes for early stage companies to partner with larger ones as well. And I then went into digital health and worked a bit with Novartis Digital Accelerator Lab, as well as helped the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation build out their innovation pipeline, focusing on neglected tropical disease diagnostics. And I think that, throughout all this, I've had amazing colleagues and friends who I've been able to, talk about our passions with, right? About addressing unmet needs and about thinking about how you can really have impact and elevate people who might not be getting the right might not have the right networks, or might not be able to access the right networks in order to move some of their businesses forward. And I think that those networks sort of have really come into play, because Linda Grube and Corinne Neveny, who are the 2 co-founders of Avestria Ventures, I've known Linda for a decade, and we have been very close and worked together as well. And so our skill sets really aligned, and we invest at Avestria. We invest in female founders and women's health in life sciences. And that basically means we take a very broad view of what women's health means, but it's basically anything that impacts women exclusively, predominantly, or differently than men. So not just reproductive health, because women are more than our reproductive organs, but areas like autoimmune disease, neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer's, of course, things like menopause and fertility, but then also things like cardiovascular disease and respiratory. And so I think that, investing out of Avestria, this really fulfills so many of the things that I've wanted to do before, which are really at the intersection of improving lives for patients, using technology to do that, and being able to advance new innovations, right? And then also working with a fantastic team, of course. And so I feel just very fortunate to be in this space and to have connected with so many other fantastic women like all of you. So with that, maybe what I'll do is just kick this off. I mean, I think the audience can see that there are numerous ways to create a path here. So one thing that I'd love for each of the panelists to talk about is, what is your superpower, right? How has that enabled you to succeed in navigating this space and to make the choices that have gotten you to where you are today? perhaps we'll start with Sam, if you could kick that off.
So I thought about this. I think I'm a supercharged nerd magnet, which turns out to be a really awesome thing. I'm a nerd, so it makes sense. But what I've become really good at is finding super talented, super creative people and getting them on board to our mission. So just coming up with teams that are very interdisciplinary, very collaborative, and just people who enjoy working together and are willing to share ideas that may go against the norm. And that's been very helpful having a startup, especially because as a CEO, you have very clear limitations. You can't do everything. So it's important that you can fill in those gaps with talented people. And I think that's made all the difference with my company. I'm not sure what my, sorry.
Good.
No, I was just saying, I'm not sure what my super suit would look like, but go ahead.
We need somebody to design us one. Okay. For myself, I don't know. I think it's maybe a combination of, I call myself a humanist. Like I really love people. Like I really, really love people and culture. And, I tend to just be attracted to all types of energy and all types of walks of life and all types of ways. And so it's made me like a master connector. And I thank USC for kicking that off for me because I didn't know what a network was before I got there. But, I just really value different perspectives and understanding how people show up in life in various ways. And I think it's allowed me to be super empathetic and to stand in for people in places they may not have access to that I do, and recognizing when I have privilege to do that. And so I think that's been really helpful for me to be everybody's homegirl, sister girl, auntie. Like we just family after after we meet, and I love that energy and being available for a community. So I think that's really helped me in what I do now.
Yeah, so for me, a little bit like Lisha, I think I'm a connector. My brain is always looking for how to connect people and make them thrive. And, I always feel like I have this game where, you swipe the cards and you flip the cards and you make the pairings kind of thing. And of course, I think I'm a citizen of the world. So I really think I because of all my career being in very different places, I am very open to different forms of doing things. And also I want to connect everybody that I know with the rest of the world, because I really think that now more than ever, you don't need to invest locally. You can invest through Zoom and suddenly the possibilities become endless. And I also I think now I'm ready to be unapologetic and speak up also for those who can't speak up, a little bit like Lisha is saying. I think twice in my career, I've already sacrificed my cushy job for what was right. And I'm no longer scared because I think I have a network that, can support my dreams. And, I can survive no matter what, because I decided to become an investor very early on and be financially independent. And that gives me the extra advantage of, being myself and trying to support the people who cannot talk for themselves.
I love all these things, right? In terms of empathy and talent and recognizing privilege, which is, we're not taught that as how to do that in school, right? I think that's something that's so impactful that we grow with experience. And, Juliana, I really love what you're talking about with no longer being scared, right? Because I think, for me, I do things that scare myself sort of every day too, a little bit. But being able to have that confidence that you can get through it, right? And that you can get to the other side. I think
it's being scared, but still doing it. Yeah,
absolutely. I love that. I think, similar to all this, when I think about superpowers, right, in terms of catalyzing things, one particular thing too, I think that has been really helpful to me as an investor, but even in my operational side, has been, not having to be the expert in the room, right? And I think part of that is, you know, especially as an engineer and coming up in a very technical discipline, right? And training as an MD, right? You say, I've got to be the expert, right? I need to know what the information is, and I've got to be the person who has the answer. And I think that navigating this in a situation where I've shifted to, I want to be the person who's asking the best questions in the room. I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. I want to ask the best questions. And that, I think, that mindset shift had actually really helped me to think about, you know, has just opened up so many doors, right? And has given me a lot of opportunities to pursue things, right? Because I think that when you're scared of not being the expert, fine, but, you know, anybody can ask great questions. And I think that's something that's accessible to you, even when you're, you know, developing. And, you know, I hope I never stop drawing, but I love that, you know, we're drawing upon all these talents. I mean, what is it, Lisha and Sam, what do you think? I mean, what do you do that scares you, perhaps, and, you know, and how have you thought about moving forward through those? What are the things that help you with that?
Yeah, so things like this panel honestly scare me. So I've always been an introvert, but also it's always been hard for me to kind of be the center of attention, the speaker in the room. But I've found that that's necessary sometimes, especially trying to push forward something that you believe in. You have to actually get out there and share it with people. So I think when I do things like this, I just remember that Lisha and Juliana are saying that everyone is human and nobody's perfect. So it's just having a level of compassion for yourself. Not just being nice, because we can trick ourselves into, you know, we say nice things that we don't believe, but just compassion. You know, if you make a mistake in a place that scares you, but something you have to do, it's okay. You know, we all do it. We all make mistakes. It's just compassion, I think, is what helps me the most.
Yeah, I think, you know, I'm always insecure about who I am and what I do and how I do it, you know, and people always underestimate me, particularly in tech, particularly engineering. Like, I'm not technical enough, you know, and I'm like, I can architect the whole payment ecosystem, you know, in the back of my head. Like, don't play with me. I've been doing this for 20 years. Like, but, you know, I always getting challenged, you know, by those engineering dudes and bros in tech. And, you know, I have to just know, like, you know, they're never gonna believe in me the way I believe in myself. They're never gonna give me my worth. Like, I can't rely on them to validate who I am and what I do and who I know and how I do it, you know. And I think that's just what always have to go through those defeating statements, because, you know, most people, you know, they never met anybody like me and they don't get it. You know, they're like, well, where are you from? Where you know, like, they're trying to put it together. How'd you get here? Because your people doesn't exist here in this world. And so, you know, I just have to, like, dismiss that, because that's not me and not who I am or where, you know, how I was raised to be. So, you know, I have to just kick that out of my head a lot.
Yeah, in my case, you know, I think a lot about this imposter syndrome that many women and diverse founders say they have. And I'm like, you know, actually, it's not a real imposter syndrome, because if we believe we have an imposter syndrome, it's because all these little and constant microaggressions that we've been having to face, you know. And a lot of people tell you, oh, you have imposter syndrome. Where does it come from? It's like, if you're constantly overlooked, if you're constantly, you know, talked over, interrupted. I mean, those microaggressions make you have an imposter syndrome, of course, because people are subtly very telling you all the time that you don't have a seat at the table. So I'm, you know, this imposter syndrome is caused by something. It doesn't come from, you know, our genetic code suddenly realizing that all women or all diverse people are imposters, you know. So that's something that, you know, has made me think quite a lot. I was pretty scared about what other people think, you know, and when I started confronting my previous, you know, colleagues and people who were not doing the right thing in my previous jobs, I was scared about what it would look like, you know. I was scared of being the uncomfortable person telling it what it was in the room. Nobody wants to be that person. But then I realized that, I had to be that person. So I'm no longer, I think I can rely in everything that I've learned. I think I can rely on myself to be able to survive financially. So I think it's my role now. I've been put in there, and when you can do it, is also your responsibility to do it and speak up for others. So that's what has changed for me.
That's so incredible. Yeah. And I think, as women navigating our way through, one of the, I definitely feel alone sometimes, but I also think that one of the things that has been just such a incredible gift, right, has been finding other women like yourselves, right? And we're all kind of going through this together in that level of community and connection. Who do you rely on? Like, who is your sort of support, right? How do you find these folks, and who sponsors you and has given you good advice, and maybe even share some of the most impactful advice that you've received and how that helped you shape what you're doing today?
So I can go first. So the best advice I get are from a lot of different people, but especially people who understand the challenges that I'm going through, and just very specific ones. So for example, I'm a new mom running a startup, or being a Black woman in the tech world trying to run a startup company. But I think one of the best pieces of advice I received is that the CEO that tries to do everything is a bad CEO. And for me, that was a hard but important lesson to learn, because I had this kind of superwoman overcompensate mindset, because I have been in so many situations where I was overlooked or discounted or not really given the time of day. So I always felt I had to go above and beyond everyone else around me just to get the same level of respect or attention or consideration. So when it came down to, actually hiring my first employees and having to delegate work to other people and let go of control of my company when I had been doing everything, it was hard, but it turned out to be a very good exercise, and it's so important. I think one, because doing so gives your employees kind of ownership in what you're doing, so they feel like they're part of your mission, not just paid to do some tasks. And it also gives them the freedom to share their ideas, or just be a bigger part of the company. But yeah, that was the best piece of advice. A CEO that tries to do everything is not a good CEO.
Yeah, I had an executive mentor who said, get your arsenal of lawyers ready and keep them on retainer. And I was like, what are you talking? That's silly. No, me? What? And she was right. Like, I can't tell you how many lawyers I have and how many lawsuits, because essentially when you start to become great and you have things to protect and IP to protect and career to protect and people to protect, there's so many things that come after you. And like, at first I took it personal, and I'm like, this is just how they play the game. And, I thought, like, you really need a group of people who are going to help protect you. And so my protection is like, lawyers are protection. They protect who I am, my assets, people I love and care about. And even in building companies and entities, like it's such an important part, lawyers to help me vet this idea. And, like, they became my best friends. And yes, they're costly. But like, I just realized, like, if I'm going to like evolve to play this level of the game, I got to step up, my arsenal of people that are with me doing it. And so that I thought it was never going to be me. And I was like, oh my God, you were so right.
It's so funny how you can just find friends, right? And, places you never might have thought of. But yeah, I love that. Juliana, what about you?
Yeah, so I think my support group has been the Portfolia investors and LPs. You find kick-ass women who, really believe in what they're doing. And when you talk to them, it's like, my goodness, all of them are so brilliant and empowering other women and making sure that, we all rise together, that, I started, looking for advice whenever, I was bullied, or I would, hear some other entrepreneurs being bullied. And I'm like, I'm part of this very powerful group, but at the same time, I'm allowing my day-to-day job to do this to me. So, there was a dichotomy that wouldn't fit there. And I'm like, there's no way I can preach that and then let myself be bullied. So I had to step out. And I don't think I would have if had not this amazing group of very powerful mentors who were really empowering me to do the right thing and basically not be scared of the consequences. And being financially independent very early on and harnessing our power. You are putting some statistics there about women and consumer. We take most of the consumer decisions there. But, we need to harness the power of the purse to invest. And investing sometimes doesn't mean, being a Shark Tank person. You can invest as little as 10K, even less, to be part of some of the funds that a lot of platforms are creating out there. And you can become educated and know how to invest in early stage. And then more than educated, I think it's more than that, is empowered, because most of us have the education to do this kind of investments. It's more about this feeling of belonging, that we are accepted into this male-dominated industry. And by getting empowered by other women like us, suddenly you realize that by investing in the things you like, you enabling them to be part of the market, and you can actually see the products you want to buy by investing in them. So I think that's really, really powerful. And I think, we need to democratize more access to early stage investing to women, because that's the only way we're going to bridge the gender gap in VC. If we're waiting for men in high positions to make the right decisions about hiring women or diverse partners, that's never going to happen. So we need to go and create our own funds and look at angel investing as a stepping stone to bridge that diversity gap.
I mean, completely agree with all that, right? And yeah, all of our heads are nodding, right? And I think it's, there might never be a perfect time to start, right? But we can all start doing something, right? At some point, right? And, life happens. So sometimes, you start in one direction and you've got to do something else, and that is okay. And you can come back to it. But I think that point of just, getting involved and being able to access that where it meets your needs, right? And where it meets, where it fits into your life, I think is so impactful, right? Because I think we're all doing that. We're all juggling a lot of things, right? And I mean, this is very general, right? But some of the most impactful stuff that I've heard is, everybody's going to drop balls, right? You're all juggling things, but you just need to know which ones are rubber and which ones are glass, right? And, I'm going to get pretty personal here because, so I was widowed 6 years ago when my daughter was 1. And, that was it was a sudden life event, and I lost my husband, and we had no idea that was coming. And so I think when something like that happens, right, and all of us have these things that happen, right, hopefully, not as momentous, but I think everybody needs that community to draw on, and you are going to say, okay, I really got to prioritize, right? What's the one thing that matters most, right? And then what's number 2? And then you go from there. And so you've just got to be able to do what works for your emotional capacity at the time, for your intellectual capacity at the time, for everything, right? And so I think that when you've got folks around you who will, you've built your network and you've built your community, and they'll carry you through that, and then you can help them when they're going through these things. I think it's really not so much that we have to do it all ourselves, right? But that we can all lean on each other. And so collectively we can move things forward, but we can also step back and take breaks, right, when that's appropriate, right? And I think that that's something that's just been really helpful to me, is to know when to let go of things, right? It's okay to drop the rubber balls. It's okay. It's fine. And as much as I want to tell myself I should do everything, we don't have to. But, I think I get so much more comfortable at that, as I go along. Right. And, and I think that that's one of the things that's also really surprised me in such a good way about being part of this community, right? About meeting amazing entrepreneurs, right? About the empathy that there is there, and about meeting other woman VCs, right? I think there's so much collaboration, right? You hear on the news about, traditional big funds, and they're fighting over deals, and they're, you know, giving competing term sheets and all the rest of that. And I would really say that, I mean, yes, we invest early, but we really are very collaborative, right? And we share deals. And even if there are entrepreneurs who come to us and we say, well, you're not a fit for our mandate, but I'd love to introduce you to these 2 or 3 other people who would be a great fit for you, right? I think that that's something that's super important, right? Is to give them a path, right? Give them the next step, right? You don't necessarily have to get them all the way there, but I think when we all collectively move together and help move our colleagues and our friends forwards, it makes a big difference in moving us all forward. So are there things that have surprised any of you about your path and raising and deploying capital? What are some of the things that, you know, have stood out in that regard?
So in terms of raising capital, I think how long it takes, and not just talking about from the point of, you know, the first introduction to a VC to actually closing a deal, but just the daily toll that it takes to fundraise. I think coming from, you know, the academic world, I really looked at it as like a grant application process, which is totally not correct. But I thought it would just be a matter of, oh, you know, I picked my top 5 VCs, let me apply, there'll be an interview process, they'll say yes or no, and it'll be over with. But I wrote down some of my lessons learned. I think one of the big ones is how wonderful it is to hear an investor say no. Because one of the challenges I faced was kind of running after the maybes. And that takes a lot of time and energy and often doesn't go anywhere. So it's nice to hear a no or a yes, we're interested, so you can move forward. But yeah, I think overall it's just realizing that fundraising can be a full-time job alongside of actually running your company. And so it's important to kind of be very wise and picky with where you give your time.
Yeah, I would say on the kind of venture side, like raising a fund is really hard to do. It's really hard to do. My model is a syndicate model where I'm like, I meet a great founder, I find some investors, and we just say, okay, let's go, because it takes a whole lot of work, you know. And the fund that Juliana, she's one of the few Black and Latinx funds that exist in this country. There's not that many that, you know, like Rise in America. And, you know, we don't get the same access to capital that everybody else gets. And so what's going on here is you have most women-led funds are emerging funds, which means they're really early stage. We have very few late, and people come, there's 0 late stage funds that are ran by people of color, just so you know, Black and Latinx people. So, you know, we're mostly in early stage, right? And so for us to have an amazing portfolio, we need to have a lot of capital and find these, our own unicorns, right? And our little unicorns are trying to struggle to find capital, right? And because they're also undervalued, right? So if you're a founder looking like us, you're probably gonna get less than your worth than if you were a white male presenting. And so our founders are getting undervalued. So they're not getting their valuation. They're not becoming a Clubhouse. They're not getting $1 billion valuation after a few months, you know, like that doesn't happen. And so that's devaluing all of our portfolios that are investing in people of color, and people think that we're not worth it or we don't deserve it. And that's just not true. And so I think like in fundraising, you know, it's always a struggle, the circular wheel of, is your portfolio companies good enough? Well, yes. Well, how come they're not attracting capital? Because racism, you know, like, I don't know how to explain this to you, right? So that's like the frustrating part of it, right? Deploying capital is easy. If you give me some money, I can give it away really fast and really easy because there's so many deserving entrepreneurs that need the capital. But raising is a beast. And we have very few women led funds that have over $10 million in assets, just to tell you the truth about it. You know, we don't even have enough to really be as meaningful. And we know that women entrepreneurs do more meaningful stuff. They build more meaningful companies about real things that we need and social problems. And, you know, like we need more of that. And so I think that's the deficit of us not getting capital. That's really hard.
Yeah, so, you know, completing a little bit what Lisha is mentioning, raising is really tough. You know, if you go to the normal LPs that many VCs go to, they would tell you, why don't you have a white dude in your set of partners, and that will make it much easier for you to fundraise. And they don't understand that's not what we want, that we really want to bring the women and the female and the diverse perspective to the market by investing in things that these people won't know about, because we want to see different things in the market too. So we need to be very creative on how to fundraise. And that's why Portfolia is democratizing access by lowering the ticket size to 10K to LPs, so that everybody has a fair chance. And also, by going to banks and foundations that really are now caring about investing in diverse people. But the route to getting those funds is much more difficult than the normal VC route. And it's not only about capital. Capital is actually, getting money is not the struggle. Is also about the social capital that all these VCs have, that is much more important than the money itself. They have the full cookie cutter structure. Like, I give you the money, then I put you these 3 persons who are going to help you with your product market fit. Then these other people are going to help you grow. And I already know beforehand who I'm going to sell the company to, and who's going to be my investment banker, and who's going to create the IPO for me. They have everything. They have the rainmakers who make the exits happen. In our case, we've just started. In many cases, we don't even have exits yet. So it's very difficult to fundraise when you don't have exits. And that's why, this social capital that, for example, Portfolia is trying to bring with the Kaufman Fellows, we've been able to get into deals that are way bigger than our capital allocation. We've been able to get in Series D deals and like Madison Reed, just because they cared about having us there. Like they said, we're going to accept your money because we want to have diverse people like you in our cap table so that you succeed and we become a joint success story. And maybe this way you can raise more funds for, impacting more people like you. So that's the kind of, we've just started and we don't have the full circle yet. And of course, getting there is going to be much more difficult. So we need to find creative ways of bypassing the whole, and jumpstarting the whole wheel, I would say.
Yeah, I would completely agree with all that, right? I think, at Avestria, we're raising our first fund, and it's interesting because Linda and Corinne, the 2 GPs, had invested early on in Envision. They were the first investors in Envision, which is a women's health company that exited the Boston Scientific in 2018. So that's kind of like the deal in women's health, right? And, I think a lot of the other funds were in there too. And, even on the heels of that, right? And people still talk about women's health being a niche, right? Even though it's, 51% of the population. But, as we're going out and raising, right? Corinne has been on 6 public boards, right? Linda did the major deals in life science tools and diagnostics, and they've had over 30 years of experience, right? And I was just saying, if you went out and you said, it was, 2 men executives who are going out and raising this fund, people would throw money at you hand over fist, right? And I think the same thing goes for thinking about the expertise, right? Similarly, we've been able to be brought in by our other folks in the venture world, right? Because of our expertise, and we're a rounding error, right? Genomic Health is one of them. They do telegenetic counseling. The round was led by Samsung Ventures and KP Ventures, and it's, our check is essentially not meaningful, not material, right? But in terms of the expertise that we bring, I think it was great that we were able to bring that to the table. And so I just want to echo that, right? And I think that, as more women come into these roles, right? And as we see, unicorns, like Calendly, like perhaps, but hopefully in women's health, we're going to see some more, right? That we're going to see more diverse founders, more diverse VCs, right? And when you're conscious about who's on your cap table and who your LPs are, right, then everybody does well, right? Our LP base is substantially overweighted in women, right? And women executives, right? And so I think that that's something that, we feel like that really resonates in terms of them saying, hey, I want to do this. But when you're looking also at the cap table for an early stage company, right? And it's got folks who know what they're doing and who are women and who are underrepresented groups. I think you've got just having that diverse perspective is so valuable, right? And it's something where we should all be really focusing our energy on, because there's so much opportunity, right? I mean, our last investment in DrugView is a real world evidence platform for communities of color and autoimmune disease. And it's just, they're doing some amazing work. And I think they've been flying under the radar for quite a bit because, it's not target, but we met them and we're just so pleased. So I think bringing your expertise and being able to, to navigate through all this, and it is uphill, right, for so many of us to fundraise, right? And we're still fundraising too. And I think it's a challenge, but being able to do all that together makes a big difference. So I would love to, maybe we've got a couple questions coming in. So I want to switch gears for a little bit and then sort of also roll this into the last question around, what can we do as a community, as founders, as potential founders and entrepreneurs, as investors, as potential investors or LPs? What can we do, as consumers? What actions can we take, where we are today to move all of this forward, right? So, so one question, and maybe Sam, I'll maybe ask you to talk a little bit about this too, but we have somebody who's producing a product in the femtech space, and she doesn't have a prototype, but is thinking about pitching to VCs or producing the actual product. And so we can all sort of weigh in on that too. And then I would also just say that for the person who asked about getting their MD this year, and asking about getting started in VC, I think there are a lot of opportunities to sort of build your network. So start looking at that. But I think I've always found that having specific expertise, right, is very valuable, particularly to people who don't have that, right? So when you bring that to the table and when you're able to add something different to the conversation, instead of saying, I'm the fifth person who's going to give you the exact same, playbook, right? I think it's really impactful to be able to differentiate yourself that way. So we could talk offline about that, but I think having the MD is a good differentiator. And then depending on sort of what you want to do with that, then there's definitely opportunities to get involved, either advising companies, but also to invest later on as an operator. So with that, what other actions do you think are sort of most important to help move us forward? And maybe Sam will kick off with you then.
Sure. So I think from the entrepreneur point of view, I found that it's so important to connect yourself to some community of women, entrepreneurs, investors, whether it's a program you join, an accelerator, an incubator, or it could be a newsletter, anything to keep you from being siloed and isolated, because it's very, I've gone through points where I was facing challenges that were very difficult and I felt isolated because I wasn't connected to a group of people who were going through similar challenges. And I think just being in a place where you can kind of glean from other people's mistakes, experiences, lessons learned, and share your own is very important. There's no reason as a community for us to make the same mistakes 2, 3, 4 times when we can kind of lean on each other, although that happens and it's okay. But yeah, I would say just connecting as soon as possible to a community, large or small.
I would chime in. So femtech, I invest in femtech, I invest in mom tech. People call this the pink ghetto because they think, women aren't worthy or something. And, I think it's an amazing space to innovate in. I do think that you do have to have something. I don't think you can show up like the white guys with a PowerPoint deck and they're gonna give you millions of dollars. Like, that doesn't happen. So you do have to have some kind of prototype, some kind of demo, some type of visualization of what the product is so people take you serious, and that can unlock some doors. So, I know it can be very expensive to get there, but having something to demonstrate would be helpful in getting your foot in the door to have those conversations. Unless you're already well networked and someone's already going to give you some seed money to go try it out. But if you're not, you're going to have to prove that you have a viable product.
And sorry, I think I answered the wrong question. I wasn't answering Nisha's question, so I can add in the end if there's time.
You want to go ahead and answer now? that's fine.
Okay, sure. So I was in this very same position, and what I did was go straight to VCs because I didn't know what else to do, and I didn't have anything to show them. And it turned out the best thing in my specific case was to go after grant funding, so that you can get non-dilutive capital just to create something that someone can see, that you can talk about. It becomes a real, it's something real as opposed to just an idea, but also. Doing customer discovery was also very important, and it's free. It doesn't take capital to do, just to validate the fact that whatever idea you have, there's someone who would be interested in pulling out their wallet for it, and it would be as impactful and hold the value proposition that you think it will. I think having that data when you go to speak with VCs or even for applying for a grant is very helpful. And it makes your whole business model much more focused.
Perfect. Yeah, I would say that fundraising is easier when you don't really need the money. So start fundraising as early as possible. I really think that once you can bootstrap and put together some even basic prototype, that helps a lot to your case. So try to do both at the same time. And sometimes there's plenty of grants out there that can also help you with that prototyping phase. In terms of Femtech, Portfolia is at its fundraising for its Femtech 2. So whoever says that there's not opportunities in the Femtech world, this is one of our funds that has been the most successful, and we invested like the fastest. So I think we would really see a lot of opportunities there. And in terms of things we can do together, I think is activating more women and diverse investors. There's a lot of people out there who, because they don't know anybody, they don't have the network, they have all the potential to become great investors and become part of this movement, because it is a movement. We need to activate more women and diverse investors so that we can have more investment to go to these underserved communities. And, in many cases, I think that women are totally comfortable with doing philanthropy, but when you talk about investing, suddenly the judgment, it becomes a little taboo. They are totally okay with giving millions of dollars, but if they investing it, it's like, okay, people are going to judge me if it was a good investment or not, if I was a good investor or not. And suddenly they feel like, it gives them pause to many of them. So I think, empowering them into that, giving them the right tools, and many of the entrepreneurs out there, if you see of wealthy people that are your friends, and, maybe those are the investors you should tackle instead of going the normal route that is super competitive of all the angel and VC groups out there. And you say like, you know what, I think you should consider investing in my deal. If you don't know how to do it, why don't you go to all these places? They can teach you how to do it. They can help you with due diligence, and then you can become an investor. So I've seen many entrepreneurs who, couldn't find any investor the normal route, that went ahead and did that, and we found new investors and we found great deals. So I think we need to also activate our closer networks.
Yeah, if I can add, Tracy, that 0.02% of affluent women invest versus 30% of men. And so I saw a question from Nicole about aspiring angels. Like, I love that, because we need more women to be accredited investors, right? And so you got to get to that million net worth, or that 200, 300,000 net K, and to build wealth so that we can start investing again. So that's always my thing. If you're not accredited, get there. But while you're on your way to aspiring, there's crowdfunding that you can invest in now. There's other ways with your skills and talents to support entrepreneurs now. So definitely get into that, and to things that, as you're building your investment thesis. So my investment thesis, I support Black and Latinx women who are disrupting in ways that nobody else does or cares about, like whatever that is, find it and like just go hard on it, so that when you're ready to write those checks, you're clear.
And I wanted to add a last thing to the person who mentioned getting the MD title. I need to caution a lot of women who feel like only titles will allow them to feel prepared. And I think Lisha is right. Sometimes going the route and start investing, even if you're not a accredited investor, through crowdfunding might be much more valuable to hone your experience than just having an MD. I'm not saying that you don't get it, but sometimes women will feel we need to have 10 titles to prove our worth. And we spend a lot of money in that could be used to invest and actually get real experience in investing and getting a return.
Yeah, completely agree, right? I mean, yeah, I don't have a formal business degree in anything, right? But you know, but yeah, I think it's so important that, you know, the farther out you get from your formal degrees, right, the less they matter, you know? And so I think it's really who you know, the network, who you're able to learn from, and building that skill set, building that ability to kind of say, this is, like Lisha said, right, this is my thesis, and here's what I'm really passionate about, and here's how I can kind of pick, and you can practice that starting now, right, starting in, you know, undergrad, right, for folks. And so I think it's something that's really impactful. And then as you're building that, and as you're building your skill set through, you know, some of these other mechanisms like crowdfunding, you know, then that sets you up to be able to come into an early stage fund, or to be an angel, or what have you, right? You know, I mean, we're going through the same thing, raising right now with Avestria, and I think we're so fortunate to have folks who have done this before, you know, as we've been leading too, right? Learning too, but I think it's just amazing to be able to share what we know with other women who are, you know, who have been thinking about philanthropic investments. And you say, well, look, not only can you do well in the world and do good, but you know, you can then take those proceeds and invest back further, right? And then you can have the equivalent of, you know, the PayPal mafia, but from a women's health perspective, right? Or from a, you know, Black and Latinx founder perspective, right? And I think that's what we need, right? It creates a snowball effect. And so we're at the, you know, the beginning right now, where we're pushing hard and you're trying to get over that inertia. But I think it's just so inspiring to see the people who are enthusiastic about it, you know, to just connect, and the energy that I see when I'm able to connect with other folks, you know, in the space too, both people who are more experienced and who are less experienced, because it just really takes a village, right? And I think there's such an incredible community, right? And I'm gonna, you know, put in a little plug, right? Because for USC, right, I think that Trojan family network is something that we are absolutely all familiar with, right? And that definitely doesn't end once we leave campus, and it just expands globally, right? And so it's not just alumni, right, but it includes our peers and our colleagues, right? And so I think that leveraging that Trojan network and being able to do that in these spaces, you've already got a huge leg up, right? So it's just activating it in search of the things that you want to do and the things that you're going to prioritize in your life. So thank you so much to everybody who joined us. We really appreciate your thoughtful questions. Thank you to Maida and Christy for organizing. And last but definitely not least, thank you to the incredible panelists. Thank you, Sam and Lisha and Juliana, for joining and just providing such brilliant insights and the authenticity and the vulnerability. I'm so grateful to be in conversation with you today. Thank you all, and have a wonderful rest of your afternoon at the conference.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Fight on.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.